Welcome back to another episode of the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Mud Gear Hannibal Race Pro Evan Preparis, and Strength and Speed owner. No guest with me today. Quick word from this episode's sponsor before we get started. This episode is brought to you by Immortal Coffee. If you were at World's Toughest Mudder and stopped by Coach's Corner, you probably got some Immortal Coffee. Essentially, it's powdered coffee. Put it in some water or milk if you really want to, and you can drink it iced. You can drink it hot. Tastes delicious. Super healthy. You're going to love the Nitro Super Coffee. If you want to read the full review, I believe I put it up on the OCR report. I think that's where that review is at. Go check it out. Go check out some Immortal. If you go to their website, immordl.com, Immortal. It kind of has a weird spelling. You can head over there, and there's usually a discount code when you first time you order. So check it out. I think they come in about 30 serving bags. Last for a while. Each scoop is, I think, 100 milligrams of caffeine. So I like it because you can kind of adjust how strong you want your coffee. And, if you're feeling a little more tired, maybe you do 2 scoops. Feeling less tired, just want a little pick-me-up, maybe it's just 1 scoop. All right, let's get to today's episode. I wanted to make sure I put out a second episode this month, even though it's been pretty crazy. And there's a couple of races I did that I wanted to talk about. So just going to do a solo episode, run through those races, give you an update on what they're up to and how they're doing. So the first race I wanted to talk about was Hazelwood OCR, the Mosh. We've talked about Hazelwood a couple times before on this podcast. Worth the trip. I can't emphasize that enough. Worth the trip. This is the third time I've gone out to Hazelwood. It's about a 6-hour drive for me, so if it was not a good race, I would not be spending my time to go out there. And they usually put on 2 events a year, one in the winter-ish, February, March is typically when they've been doing it, and the other one is typically in the fall, around October. This year they did a special Hydra series where it was a combination of the 2 Hazelwood races and Mythic race, and if you did all 3, one, they had a mini series going there, so whoever gets the highest or the fastest time in those 3 races is going to get a special prize based off of the product sponsors that are supporting the Hydra. And 2, you get a special medal, Hydra medal, with the 3-headed dragon. I know the owners for both those brands are looking to bring in some other series from around the Midwest and kind of expand that into more of a Midwest-style OCR series. But yeah, Hazelwood, such a fun event. Mythic Race actually bought a rig there, so they had their own rig set up, specifically with the Mythic Race branding. William Schell designed it. And then Hazelwood, time trial format, so ton of fun. Everyone goes off one at a time. You got to run as hard as you can. This year, dragging butt a little bit, and with the time trial format, I didn't realize how close third, or how far in front of first was, or how far in front second ended up ultimately being. I ended up finishing third. Kim Welch, one of the Strength and Speed guys, won. He beat me by a solid amount. And Jamie Ron, must have been putting in some serious mileage over the winter, actually beat me as well. So I should have put out a little more effort, clearly, because he beat me by, I think, about a minute. It's a 5K course typically, and it's super dense with obstacles. It's like 50 obstacles. If you want to check out Hazelwood, their fall event is coming. It's called the Rotten Pumpkin. That is on October 26th. Again, I think that one's usually a little bit shorter. It's about 3 miles. Again, it's going to be 50 obstacles. So awesome. Again, these are not super big type obstacles, but there's a lot of them. And there's typically only 1 or 2 lanes, which is why they run that time trial format. For anyone who's looking to put on their own OCR in their local area, I would highly encourage you checking out Hazelwood, because it is a good template for how you can replicate OCR at a low cost with a ton of obstacles. That's a lot of fun. That, in my opinion, is way higher value per dollar than you're getting at some of the bigger brands. And again, I race across all brands. That being said, going to a big brand, Tough Mudder Spartan, it's kind of like going to a chain restaurant. You know what you're going to get, and you know kind of the quality and the value you're going to get. But going to these smaller OCRs, Mythic Race, Hazelwood, and some of the other ones I'm going to be talking about on this episode, you get a more unique flavor, and a lot of times the experience is more memorable, right? With a lot of the Tough Mudders I've been to 59, they start to blend together, and honestly, I can't remember the difference between some of them. However, at Hazelwood, I have very distinct memories of the several events I've done, and really all the smaller branded OCRs. I have very specific memories because they're unique, and they can adjust obstacles on the fly. If they don't like the way something's doing, they can They can amp up the difficulty super hard, or they can make it super easy. Like, they can adjust the difficulty. And for me, as an athlete, someone who's competitive and wants to do well, I like that going in because it gives me a little bit of fear. Because even if the brand is not necessarily known for hard obstacles, they might put something, or the weather might not cooperate, and it might be something that's failable. We're going to talk about that in the next race I'm going to talk about, and how that kind of played into things. Doug Littlefield is the race owner / director there. The race, the Mosh, this one was music themed. The previous kind of winter editions were Valentine's Day Massacre, and the one after that was just called the Massacre. What I loved most about the Mosh is the week before they emailed you and they were like, hey, what do you want your walk-up music to be? Which is so cool. With a time trial format, they could do essentially individual walk-up music. So I got to pick a song, walked up, they're playing it, and then from there, I got to run the race, with whatever theme song I had picked. I picked the Coheed and Cambria song called Welcome Home. If anyone's played, I'm going to date myself real bad here. Rock Band, like when very first Rock Band came out, they had that song in there. I've also seen Coheed and Cambria randomly in Australia in 2006. We happened to be on vacation in Australia. They happened to be playing. And, went and saw them in concert. Yeah, the Mosh, ton of fun. Even for elites, they had some really great prizes. First Form was sponsoring them. So we got pretty sweet supplement goodie bags. Probably close to like $200 worth of supplements. So if you're capable of getting into top 3, you'll essentially get your money back in supplement form. And if you're not capable of getting in top 3, you're just going to love the event. Really unique use of their terrain. It was held at kind of a fitness center, and at one point we descended a net that was hanging over the side of essentially the second story. It's ground level, but then it drops down on the backside of the building. So we descended a net down onto that. They used a skate park for a Tyrolean traverse. You run up the skate park ramps essentially. There's a wooded portion. There's a concrete portion. There's a grass portion. A lot of mix. This race actually went underneath the building at one point. They have kind of a drainage area going underneath the building, and that's actually how the race started. Music playing, your walk-up song, you run off, head under the building, crawl through a bunch of half tubes there, and then get out on the course and start crushing obstacles the entire way. In previous years, they've used the pool where you actually climbed out of a dry pool. Other years, they've used the water slide, both going down it wet or going up it wet, and then this year it was running up it dry. So every time the 3 races I've been to at this location have all been different and all been memorable and all been great. Turnout is typically not the highest for Hazelwood. So again, if you're a competitive person, want to squeeze in a podium, I would head over there and show them what you got. If you think you're better at obstacles and maybe a little less better at running, again, I would head over there. If you just like obstacles because they're fun, and that's why we do obstacle course racing, I would head over there. Head over to Hazelwood. Again, their next race is the Rotten Pumpkin. Please check them out. I will unfortunately be moving, so for the 3rd year in a row, I will miss the fall event, so I will not be at the Rotten Pumpkin, but definitely something I would look into. So that was one race. Next race I want to talk about, Murder Creek Mud Run. I was supposed to run Mythic Race. It was going to be Podium 100, because essentially it was going to double up, do the individual one, and planning on winning the team one, winning the individual 5-hour ultra at Mythic Race. But I had All Army Combatives competition, so I took me and my guys went to Columbus, Georgia to compete in the All Army Combatives competition, fighting competition the last 3 days, grappling with open palm strikes, and then essentially full MMA rules in the final day. Shout out to 1st Infantry Division Combatives. If anyone wants to see what that's about, head over to our Instagram page, 1ID Combatives, or you can check out our Facebook page. Those guys are doing great stuff. Great group of guys I've been working with. And we're going to be doing a Victory Week tournament June 11th, 12th, 13th. So again, if you want to see what's going on at Fort Riley in the middle of Kansas and see some soldiers fighting it out, I'm going to be posting a bunch of stuff onto the 1ID Combatives Facebook and Instagram page. They're linked, so you'll see the same content on both pages. Anyway, that's when I couldn't go to Mythic Race, so I was a little bit upset about that. But the night of the finals, which was Saturday night, was in the afternoon/evening, which means I had Saturday morning open, and I was already in the southeastern portion of the United States. So thanks to OCR Buddy, went and looked up, what's within a 250-mile radius of Columbus, Georgia, essentially that's about as far as I could drive, make it to a race, run a race, and still make it back in time in order to hit up the All-Army Combatives Finals, which we had 4 guys competing in. So, really cool opportunity, and an opportunity to check out a local brand that I've never been to. Also, an opportunity to race and possibly podium in a state that I did not have any podiums in. I keep track of where my podiums are, all the different brands. So, over the last decade, I've gotten 34 different brands of OCR podiums in 21 different states. So, I headed down to Alabama and went over to Murder Creek Mud Run. Fun thing I realized on my way there, or the night before, kind of as I was going to bed, is in a different time zone. I was in Eastern time zone. I was crossing into Central, so that actually took away an hour. So it was a pretty tight connection as far as driving, between driving to the race, doing the race, driving back, and then making it to the finals. Anyway, if you're not familiar with Murder Creek Mud Run, Phoenix OCR, which owns a couple of smaller brands, that's one of their brands, the Murder Creek Mud Run. It's kind of in the middle of Alabama. Don't really know anything big that's near there off the top of my head, but named Murder Creek Mud Run because part of the race runs through the creek that is in that area. And unfortunately, the week of the race, they experienced some heavy rains. So it's supposed to be about a 5K OCR. Course got rained pretty bad. The creek / stream / river, whatever you want to call it, was essentially overflowing. They deemed it was too unsafe to actually run through the Murder Creek there. So they had to reroute the course the week of the race. And when I talk about brands, this is one of the things I always talk about. How good is a brand at adapting to changes and the unknowns? And when I see brands encounter problems like flooding on the course, we've seen Conquer the Gauntlet experience that in the past, or rain delays or lightning delays, which we've seen at Toughest Mudder at Poconos a couple years ago. How they react to those situations and how they deal with it, to me, says a lot about the brand. Because it's easy to put on a good race when everything goes perfectly. It's hard to put on a good race when people are stealing course markings like they did at Bit Out of the Lions, random people in the park, or part of your course gets flooded, or you can't run on it, or the weather makes part of it unsafe, etc. Anyway, Julie Wolf, who's in charge of Phoenix OCR, also helps or works at Legendborn. So anytime you email Legendborn, she's the one I typically end up talking to. She was the race director out at Phoenix / Murder Creek Mud Run. And they put on a great race. So went out there, had a mix of mostly flat. We had some concrete. Again, I think due to the reroute. There's some grassy patches. There were some super wet patches due to kind of the rainfall that week. Early mud pit. Right at the beginning, one area was super deep. If you went straight down the middle, you were like thigh deep in mud. If you were near the edge, you were a little more like foot / shin deep in mud. So always pick your route through the mud carefully. That being said, you still do actually have to go into the mud. You can't just go around that would be cheating. That would be going around the obstacle. Anyway, that kind of broke up the field as people got stuck, and then course took off. Most of these smaller branded OCRs, a lot of times the obstacles are not difficult, or at least not at the beginning, and a lot of times they're not difficult at the beginning to help spread out the field. So the field took off early. It was me and 2 other guys. A-frames, walls. There was a swimming portion. There was like a yoke carry at one point. There was a bucket carry. I thought the course was well marked. One of their cooler obstacles was a vertical pegboard, but it was at a slight angle. So even if you didn't have the upper body strength to get up a pegboard, you could still kind of use your feet and work your way up that. If anyone's familiar with the Liberator, an old World's Toughest Mudder obstacle from 2000, I want to say 15. If you have my book, the Ultra OCR Bible, the only book on training for ultra distance obstacle course racing, it's actually the back cover picture is the Liberator. Anyway, Murder Creek Mud Run has a very similar obstacle, that vertical, kind of slightly slanted pegboard. Anyway, the race continued. It's supposed to be about 3 miles. I think it ultimately ended up being about 4.5, which I did not mind, again, because that plays to my advantage. But it was a surprise. I remember looking down at my watch at like 3.3, and we were not near the festival, and I was like, oh, I guess we're running a little long today. But one of the things I mentioned earlier is the difficulty of obstacles. So they had one rig, which normally wouldn't be that hard. It was essentially a PVC pipe to a bar, and then it was like, if I can remember correctly, I think it was a ring to a rope to a ring to a rope to a ring, and then to the bell. However, I mentioned the rain, and there was morning dew, so this PVC pipe that would probably be not a problem an hour into the race as the sun dried it out. When I went through on the first lap, it was soaked. Me and one other guy were in the lead. We got to that obstacle, and that PVC pipe, again, just drenched. I was very uncertain going across it. I could feel my arms slipping. Made it to the bar in the middle, and ultimately used my momentum and reach. Again, if you haven't checked out any of the Strength and Speed YouTube page videos, I would check those out. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. There's a video I shot at Otherworld OCR where I talk a lot about rig technique. It's about a 5-minute video. I would check that out. But essentially, when there are easy hold, hard hold, easy hold, hard hold, I just skip the hard holds. So I pull back on whatever my last hold is, get a good swing, and I bypass both ropes. As I essentially went the PVC pipe to the pole, grabbed the ring, pulled back, skipped the rope, and then went ring, ring, bell. And when I was talking to other people, that's what I was recommending to them doing before the race, because I went up and just kind of jogged past it before the race and took a look at it. Another good tip of advice: anytime there's a rig and it's in the festival area or kind of near the festival, on your warm-up jog, I highly recommend highly recommend jogging by the rigs, because you can kind of plan out your attack before the race. So when you run up to the obstacle, you are not thinking about what you're doing. You know what your plan is. You've mentally rehearsed it. You've visualized doing it. And then when you get to it, you'll be able to get across it easier with less wasted movement and faster. Anyway, so I got across that. The guy who was in second at that point ended up getting stuck. I think his name was Josh. Young guy, local guy, cool dude. His dad, I think, was actually a pastor or a preacher, not sure. We ended up talking about Christianity while we were running and leading the race at one point. That was kind of funny. That was pretty cool, though. Speaking of that, one of the other things that was unique about Murder Creek Mud Run is before the race, they actually said a prayer, for a safe and fun day for their participants. As we've talked about on one of the previous podcasts, right? I'm Christian. I did enjoy that. That being said, I think based off the location of the race would kind of dictate if that seems appropriate, right? So, like, I grew up in New York. I don't think that behavior would even though I'd like it in New York, I don't think that's necessarily appropriate in New York, just based off of the climate up there. So I have seen that at one other race before, and it was a Sunday Conquer the Gauntlet team race, because we were out there instead of at church. But this was a Saturday Murder Creek Mud Run. I thought that was kind of a cool touch, and based off the clientele there and how people reacted, everyone seemed to pray along, or they just kind of, stayed quiet and, just accepted a moment of silence. Even at Tough Mudder, we do a moment of silence, which at that point you can pray if you so desire, or if you just want to take a moment of self-reflection, you can do that as well. Typically, the moment of silence at Tough Mudder is typically for fallen veterans, anyone who's fallen in service to country or our world, kind of fighting for peace and justice, or, first responder type thing. I do think that stuff is nice. Maybe I'm biased because I'm a first responder as a military guy, but, I've seen friends who are in their 20s and sometimes younger have their life cut short due to serving their nation, even though they're not even allowed to drink. So anyway, long story short, I thought the prayer pre-Murder Creek Mud Run was appropriate based off of the situation and the environment and that town. I thought people seemed to like it. Made it across the rig. They had a couple tire flips at that point, a balance beam on a PVC pipe that was also kind of slippery. And then it was up a kind of like an Augustus Gloop type tunnel with water pouring down a slide into, I think it was a soapy mud pit, and then a regular mud pit, and then kind of like a gauntlet of mud pits and crawls through the finish line. Super cool ending. Nice for spectators to see that kind of like final couple 100-meter slog through mud and over-under obstacles. Anyone who's in the Midwest has been to Wichita Gladiator Dash or to Thor in Wichita Falls, Texas. Kind of a very similar ending as far as going over-under. I did like the obstacles better at Murder Creek Mud Run than Thor or Wichita Gladiator Dash. As far as number and difficulty of obstacles, I did like Hazelwood better. That being said, they're so geographically far apart. If you're going to one, you're probably likely not going to the other. But Julie Wolf, experienced OCR personality, has been around the sport for a while, involved with Legend Born. I thought her race was great. Just a ton of fun. And for me, the community in that one was really good too. Just hanging out and talking with people after and before the race was cool. I did a couple of quick social media stuff for OCR Buddy. I think if you scroll back in the OCR Buddy timeline to mid-April, you'll be able to see a kind of a highlight video. So there's some of the obstacles there. On the female side, Heather Jo Cox was there, who I hadn't seen. I mean, I feel like she was all over the place in 15, 16, 17. I feel like I haven't seen her in a while. I'm not sure when the last time I saw her, but it was good to see her again. Familiar face, and she ended up winning for the ladies. Essentially the same thing happened to me that happened to her. So she was in second. The lead girl got stuck at that rig, and Heather moved into first. And I think the girl that was in the lead prior to that ended up losing her band at the rig. Another reason we like mandatory obstacle completion races, right? Because it is, if you fail, it becomes essentially a catastrophe for the competitive nature of the race. So I think that makes it more interesting, because then you actually really have to balance your running versus your strength training, versus if I can do burpees to get out of it, I should just focus completely on running and, I can err on the side. I don't have to be as cautious. I can err on the side of just being fast and doing obstacles if I need to, or taking the penalty if I need to. That one did not have a prize pack. I did get a plaque that has like first, second, third, based off your finishing placement. So that was cool. I always like little nice touches to remember the races by. And I enjoyed Phoenix OCR branded races. I would be curious to check out some of the other ones and kind of compare and contrast them. We'll see if I ever make it to any of those. But if you're in the area for any of the other Phoenix races, I think it's worth checking out. Again, anytime there's an obstacle that essentially changes the finishing order, that's a good brand to me. That's a good brand. That's a brand I want to come back to, because it means it's an obstacle race. It's not a mud run with a couple of walls and a finish line. And the third race I wanted to talk about, or I guess two races, is KC Timber Challenge. As you know, I've done, I don't know how many KC Timber Challenge at this point, but I've probably done about 8 competitive ones and probably close to 6 or 8 non-competitive ones at this point. And their brands, their individual races are always interesting. Typically, the winter one is in January. The Yeti. This year at the Yeti, surprise, I showed up and they're like, we're doing a cash prize today. And I was like, wasn't tracking that before I showed up today, but I am excited. So the Yeti was cool. Surprise cash prize. I found out the morning of the race. And sure enough, I ended up winning that one. That was a cool experience. Won a couple $100 at that. Pretty good payout for a small race with a low entry fee. I think what Jen Scott, the owner there, did for that one is took the competitive heat and basically took a percentage of the competitive heat signups and put that into the prize pool. So they actually ended up paying out top 3 for Yeti in January, but it was top 3 overall only. So not male, female, just based off the number of signups. I think they had very few female signups, so they just put out a flat prize of, top 3 people across the line, regardless of gender, will win the prize purse for first, second, third. And that was a great event. Yeti's always my favorite one of the year. It's cold. When it snows, it's beautiful. If you haven't seen my documentary, Ultra-OCR Man, check it out. I will try to remember to drop the link down in the show notes below. The final day of OCR America 2, when Hell Freezes Over, was at KC Timber Challenge at the Yeti. Super cool. If you get there in January on a snow one, you're going to love it. And if it's not snowing, you'll still enjoy it. It's typically run backwards from most of the other KC Timber Challenge courses, so it's a fun, unique experience. There's usually a tennis ball, slingshot, giant tennis ball slingshot that you have to hit a target at one point, in addition to all their other fun obstacles. The low rig, they've upgraded one of their other rigs, so it's now like one arm does like normal rings, and the other one kind of slides rings over like bumps on the bar. So you kind of have to slide. It's kind of makes an awkward movement as you slide your right hand and kind of swing from ring to ring with your left hand. So that was the Yeti. They also did the OG Timber Challenge, or the regular Timber Challenge, and showed up to that one, and that was a OCR World Championships qualifier. Again, I wasn't tracking that prior to the day showing up. For both of those, I'm not 100% sure it was put out ahead of time. That being said, it was competitive. So we showed up, and there we are. And Jen's, the owner's like, make sure you get the top personnel that come across the line, because we got to send them in for OCR World Championships qualifier. So small competitive field for this one. Me, John Taylor, and a couple of the guys from this Republic Warrior Sports team. That's his gym out in Republic, Missouri. Ninja gym, so a lot of those guys are really good at obstacles. But they are getting faster every time I see them at a race. Every time I run against them, I'm like, you guys are just a tiny bit closer to me than you were last race. I think John also finished second at the Yeti. Anyway, showed up to the OG Timber Challenge. Ended up winning that one. John came in second, and Derek Buchanan, another Warrior Sports guy, Ninja guy, ended up coming in third. If anyone wants to check out my Instagram, OCR Buddy's Instagram, or KC Timber Challenge's Instagram, there's like kind of a quick highlight video, similar to what I did for Murder Creek Mud Run on there. Show some of the obstacles that you can see on course. Again, they're famous for their the buses that are kind of slanted downhill that you run up or down. The OG Timber Challenge also had a bubble kind of pit pile at the end. That's kind of how you finish, making for a cool, fun ending. Fun for elite athletes as you kind of storm through that, but also great for the kids. There's also the famous zip line in the middle of the course. Again, an awesome part. You run up full speed, grab the zip line handles, slide down it, and then come running off of there. KC Timber has 2 more events left. One of them is actually tomorrow, so probably not going to make it that one. That is Wild Women's Timber Challenge, essentially a female-only race, or if men want to show up, they can show up in wearing a dress, right? So not taking themselves too seriously. I've done that event once or twice before. I think twice before. It's fun, different type of environment, and really a great opportunity to get more women involved in the sport. There's typically, most starting lines tend to be more male-heavy than female-heavy. And that's doubly true at the competitive elite level. And then their final event of the year, before they close down the obstacle course racing and focus on Exiled, their Haunted Woods experience in Bonner Springs, so Kansas City, Kansas, is the Family Timber Challenge, which will be my final KC Timber Challenge event for the foreseeable future. That is, I believe, June 23rd, Family Timber Challenge. That's a non-competitive one. It's one of their non-competitive ones. However, I will be there, and I will run that first lap as hard as I can. So if anyone wants to party with me and throw down a hard first lap, you're welcome to show up June 23rd, and we can make a race out of it. Obviously, won't count for a podium. There's not going to be OCR World Qualifier. There's not going to be cash prize for that one or anything like that. But you can get a good training lap in. That's what I use it for. So I'll run that lap super hard, come back, and then do another lap with my kids. At the Family Timber Challenge, all the obstacles are essentially adjusted for height and size. There's usually a couple different difficulty lanes, so the minimum age to get on course is 5, but 5 plus, the kids will always have a good time. And my daughter has been doing it for the last couple of years. She runs most of it. A couple of uphills we usually walk. We usually jog the flats and downhills, and then she can do most of the obstacles. It's been pretty cool to take her back year after year. KC Timber Challenge has upgraded their obstacles, but a lot of them tend to stay consistent. So you'll get a slightly different experience every year, but you also get to see the ability of improvement. So I've seen my daughter go from like, hey, I refuse to step in any mud pits, to now she'll run through the mud pit. I've seen her go from like, I'm too scared to go over the wall, to like, oh yeah, I'll go over the wall, no problem. That's been really cool to watch. And then just watching her getting used to doing the rings and the rigs and stuff like that, and building that strength, that confidence, all the good stuff that go with being an athlete and learning persistence and resiliency, regardless of the sport, whether it's obstacle course racing or something else. All that stuff I've got to see develop in real time at obstacle course racing, and then get enhanced by her, stuff she does on the side like dance. Anyway, check out KC Timber Challenge, or check out their Haunted Woods experience Exiled in October, and check out their Zipline experience, which runs year-round. Lastly, before I get going, wanted to give a quick shout out to Obstacle Running Adventures. I was just on their podcast a couple weeks ago. If you listen to our last episode of Strength and Speed Podcast, you know I hit my 100th podium. So talk with Mike Stefano. He did more of a deep dive into that, and then we hit up on a bunch of other topics. It was kind of a random episode. We bounced around all different sorts of topics. So even if you listen to my 100th podcast episode where we talked with the toughest team on the last Strength and Speed Podcast, I would still head over to Obstacle Running Adventures because we really strayed into a whole bunch of different topics in the hour long we were recording. We were bouncing around, covering kind of like state of the OCR industry a little bit. All right, I think that's it for now. I'm going to get going. Check out those links below. Again, I'm going to drop some links down there for the feed, the supplement, kind of endurance supplement superstore warehouse online to pick up all your endurance supplements needs. I highly recommend Hammer Nutrition. Drop some links to my books, links to the Blegmits at the Strength and Speed Online store. Strength and Speed Online store also has all my books, plus links to all my digital books. Again, if you're going to buy my books off Amazon, go to my website first and click through my website first. It kind of like gives me credit for that. My digital books tend to be cheaper just because they don't have a production cost. So you can pick up digital or hard copy. If you want to help spread this podcast, share it around, share my books around. Again, that stuff gives me a signal to keep producing episodes, especially as my time in the military comes to a close and my time at seminary starts picking up. I will have other obligations. And as my kids get older, I want to spend more time with them because they're growing to little tiny humans. So I know when I was talking to Mike Stefano, we were talking about podcast numbers, and my podcast numbers have not. I looked. I rarely look, but I look occasionally. A lot of times when I go to upload a new episode, I'll see the numbers. They have not returned to pre-COVID numbers. I'd say they're about, depending on the episode, half to a third of what pre-COVID numbers were for podcast episodes. So if you want the podcast to continue, please spread it around or spread my books around. Again, that gives me a sign to continue. Got a new book coming out, Tiga Tactics Runner's Guide to Self-Defense. Will be the name. That may not be the name. That's the topic of the book. It talks about safety and security while running for self-protection. It's not just hard skills like punching people in the face that are trying to attack you. A lot of it is soft skills, so having the situational awareness, understanding of where and when I'm accepting risk, and what contingency plans are, right? So if you have a good contingency plan, you have to be less worried on your run. Just like when you're driving a car, you don't have to be as worried about a car accident because you have a seatbelt, you have an airbag, you probably know what number to call. You may have like a flat kit in your car or a spare tire. You may have a jack in your car, right? So it's doing the work ahead of time so you have a solution before you're put into a bad situation and then trying to figure it out on the fly. That's kind of the goal of the book. Similar to On Endurance, my book on mental strategies for running endurance, and similar to the Sponsored Athlete, it's kind of on the shorter side. I think this one may be 150 pages. Got to double check. But that should be coming out this summer. And if you want more self-defense or self-protection focused tips, check out the Tiga Tactics podcast. Again, link down below. And if anyone's interested in bladed arts training or online training from me, that's on the online store. You can reach out to me and we can set something up through that. Finally, if you enjoyed the faith, fighting, and fitness episode, or the fitness, fighting, and faith, that was the order I put it in, episode, I'm going to drop some of the links to some of those books I recommended below. The Case for the Creator by Lee Strobel kind of grapples with the question, is there a God? The Case for Christ, another Lee Strobel book, grapples with the question, is Christianity the correct religion? And then I'm going to drop a third one that I realized I did not mention on the podcast. That one is called Surprised by Christ, I believe. It is a Christian who was basically in search of what the authentic, or what he could find was the closest religion or the closest denomination of Christianity to what they had immediately post-Christ, right? So basically what the 12 apostles and their immediate successors were doing. And that's kind of an interesting book because it takes you through that pastor's journey as he tries to kind of figure out and find that question. And that one is Surprised by Christ. Again, I'll drop all those links down below. I'm going to get going. I'm going to try to be more diligent about uploading episodes in a timely fashion. This was just a lot between Podium 100, traveling to New York, and I got back home and turns out my basement had a water issue, so all the carpet was wet, so we had to rip up the entire carpet. So that took about 2 days. of ripping up carpet and dragging it outside. Again, thanks to my combatives guys for helping out. Another benefit of having a good group of guys and good support structure around you. And then I immediately got sick. Every World's Toughest, I basically get sick after, and I think a lot of part of it is mental. Like, my body knows that it's done racing for the season, and it's like, all right, now you can let down your defense because you don't have any other races, so you can get sick now. And I think with Podium 100, part of me was like, that's it. I've done what I need to do here, and my body just kind of gave up. So I got back from the Toughest Mudder experience, and I was immediately sick, been coughing, laid in bed for a couple days. It was not pleasant. Mostly doing better now, though. Should be recovered in time to squeeze in another podium before I have to start moving all my stuff and getting ready to head to the East Coast, head to Boston, and hang out with Mike Stefano there. Plus, I've been helping out, teaching some of the kids' martial arts classes at my local martial arts gym and helping with the local church for Vacation Bible School again with kids. So just been super busy. Haven't quite had the time to sit down and schedule episodes with people. So you get some of these solo episodes. I hope you're enjoying them. I feel like I can put out a lot more content a lot faster, and they're easier for me to put out. That being said, I know we're primarily a guest podcast, so I try to still stick to that format and only do the solo episodes when I'm pressed for time or when I have a couple of topics that I want to burn through, get the information out, get it to you guys so you can absorb it and move about your day. I do have another solo episode planned at some point. We'll get to that whenever. Basically whenever I start running out of time. But the rest of them should be guest podcasts. Looking to get 3GX Mental Performance on the podcast. Sarah Grippy Snyder, one of the new Mudgear Hannibal Race Pro Team teammates. As well as Josh Fiore, one of the other Mudgear Hannibal Race Pro Team teammates. And probably the winner of Toughest Mudder East on the podcast. All right, have a good night, everyone. We will catch you all in the next episode.